One of America's closest allies, but how close of friends will these two leaders really be? One glaring issue between the two men, Syrian refugees. The Prime Minister Trudeau, he literally hugs them. They even send it out in tweets. President Trump just tried to ban them. And that's just one issue before these men right now. So right now, let's go to the White House. That's where CNN's Sarah Murray is there. Sarah, what are we hearing about? What are we learning about this visit right now today?
Well, good morning, Kate. Prime Minister Trudeau just arrived and was greeted by President Trump. They're going to be spending quite a bit of time together today in meetings. They're going to have a working lunch, and they're going to have a joint press conference later. Now, Trudeau is really seen as a liberal icon in Canada, so this is a very different relationship he's likely to have with President Trump than he did with President Obama. As you pointed out, they have sharply different views, for instance, on how to deal with Syrian refugees. But you are getting a sense that they want to start things off on the right foot with one another and on common ground. They're expected to unveil a joint initiative today designed to promote the advancement of female entrepreneurs. Trudeau has made no secret of the fact that he views himself as a staunch feminist. So this is an opportunity for them to say, hey, there is some common ground. We will see if that unified front holds over into the press conference this afternoon, though, Kate.
Absolutely, and we will. As you say, we may see them in a meeting, maybe in the Oval Office a little later this hour. Also very much waiting for that joint press conference later this afternoon. Sarah's there for us. Thank you so much, Sarah. So this visit comes at a wild time for this White House, amid rumors and reports of a possible staff shakeup in the works. At the center of this, the president's national security advisor, Michael Flynn, a senior White House official telling CNN that, in this person's words, the knives are out for Flynn after reports that he discussed sanctions with Russia's ambassador before President Trump even took office, and then after misled or maybe even lied to White House officials, including the vice president, about those conversations. The Washington Post first broke the story. Philip Rucker, the White House bureau chief for the Washington Post, he is joining me now. Phil, it's great to see you. We haven't heard anything from the president on this issue, and that's almost what surprises me most.
Yeah, it's pretty striking. It's now been 4 days since the story broke, and President Trump has said nothing, signaled nothing to indicate his support for his national security advisor, which is one of the reasons why Flynn is in such a precarious position right now. And it's not just the president. Nobody from the White House has come forward publicly to defend him and to ensure the American people that he has the president's confidence, which is leading a lot of people inside the White House to turn on Flynn. And there's a feeling from people I talked to over the weekend at the White House that Flynn's days may be numbered.
I mean, from what you're hearing over at the White House, is it conceivable, Phil, that he could lie to the vice president and keep his job if that all turns out to be true?
Possibly. I think the thing going for him most of all is that Donald Trump may not want to give in to what has now become sort of a media controversy and basically give the media a scalp. He may want to dig in his heels and defend his guy, but that hasn't happened yet. And certainly Vice President Pence is quite upset that Flynn misled him or may have lied to him. But it's not just Pence. Reince Priebus, the White House Chief of Staff, Sean Spicer, the White House press secretary, both went out publicly to defend Flynn back in January and insist to the American people that Flynn did not have those conversations with the Russian ambassador.
And when it comes to Flynn, I mean, really kind of amid all of the rumors of staff shakeups that is going on right now, it's almost that this question mark, Phil, hanging over his head and his future is even more damaging. I mean, does the president have to come out and say something one way or another, a vote of confidence, or we're parting ways?
He doesn't have to. He'll say whatever he wants to say whenever he wants to say it. But the problem for Flynn is it's created this period of paralysis where we're now going on 4 days where Flynn doesn't have that public vote of confidence, where people who work with Flynn see him as somehow weakened and undermined. And it's created a lot of controversy and drama around the National Security Council that inhibits their ability to do work at a really important time. We had the North Korean missile tests over the weekend, for example. There are serious issues that this NSC and the administration have to be dealing with.
Yeah, exactly. North Korea put that point front and center over the weekend. Great to see you, Phil. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate.
We're keeping an eye on the White House, but let's talk more about all of this that Phil has been reporting and we've got reports on. With me right now is Colin Kahl. He was Deputy Assistant to President Obama, also the National Security Advisor to Vice President Biden. Colin, it's great to see you. You were, as I mentioned, you were Vice President Biden's National Security Advisor. If he had gone out and defended you and found out later that the story was something quite different than what you had told him, what would have happened to you?
I think I probably would have been fired.
And that's the big question of what time period, what amount of investigation needs to be done here. I mean, from your perspective, can Michael Flynn function in his role successfully after this?
Well, I think there are really two issues. One is whether he indeed did mislead not only the public, but also the vice president, potentially investigators and others. I think that's really important. But the other question, which I think shouldn't be lost in all of this, is why did he mislead if he did? Because after all, the sanctions were put on the Russians because the intelligence community overwhelmingly concluded that the Russians tried to influence our election to tilt it somewhat towards Donald Trump. So the question is, why was Donald Trump's national security advisor in waiting having conversations with the Russian ambassador to potentially lift those sanctions against Russian behavior, implying that it's no big deal?
If these conversations are further confirmed, if this comes out and Michael Flynn stays in his job, what does that do?
I think a lot of it depends on his relationship with the president. At the end of the day, the National Security Advisor has authority to the degree to which they are perceived throughout the government as having the reflective authority of the president, that they are the last person in the room or one of the last people in the room. I think if this scandal kind of creates a friction or a gap between Flynn and Trump, and you also have the fact that Steve Bannon, for example, or Jared Kushner apparently are much closer to the president and have his ear much more often than Flynn, then it just makes Flynn look weak. And the challenge is it's difficult to run a process that provides the president with the best advice and to kind of corral the rest of the government if you look weak.
And there are reports, not just you go from Flynn to the National Security Council at large, that there is disarray there as well. The New York Times had a pretty amazing passage. I want to read it to you if I could. 3 weeks into the Trump administration, council staff members get up in the morning, read President Trump's Twitter posts, and struggle to make policy to fit them. Most are kept in the dark about what Mr. Trump tells foreign leaders in his phone calls. Some staff members have turned to encrypted communication to talk with their colleagues after hearing that Mr. Trump's top advisors are considering an insider threat program that could result in monitoring cell phones and emails for leaks. When you see that, do you think this is a growing pain of a new administration, or is this something more?
It's something more. I think what people have to understand is that the National Security Council staff is non-political. The vast majority of that staff is kind of the all-star team from around the government, the best intelligence officers, the best people from the Pentagon, the best people from the State Department who go there and work 14 to 16 hours a day, 6.5 days a week to keep us safe. When the Obama administration transitioned, they kept the vast majority of that staff, and it was relatively smooth. The fact that there's such friction and such a gap between the politicals over in the West Wing and the hundreds of men and women who help keep our country safe, that's a big problem.
I want to talk to you about another issue, speaking of disarray, and something that you think is misleading, is the White House, their defense, their explanation for the Yemen raid and the lead up to it. Sean Spicer, the White House press secretary, he said this about the planning timeline. Listen to this.
On January 6th, there was an interagency deputies meeting. The deputies recommended at that time that they go ahead. It was so easily approved, it was sent straight up. The conclusion was at that time to hold for what they called a moonless night, which by calendar wouldn't occur until then President-elect Trump was President Trump.
Colin, you were in that January 6th meeting.